I didn't panic when the gun clicked. I counted the seconds between his breaths instead. The rain had been falling all night, soft at first, then harder, tapping against the tall glass windows of the restaurant like fingers asking to be let in. And inside, everything felt warm, golden, predictable, the kind of place where people ordered expensive wine and talked about things that didn't matter. And I moved through it like I always did, balancing plates, memorizing orders, pretending this was enough, pretending I hadn't learned how quickly a normal night could turn into something else entirely, something sharp and irreversible. And then the door opened too fast, the sound cutting through the low hum of conversation, and the air shifted, not loud, not chaotic at first, just wrong, like a note played slightly off key. And I saw it before most people did, the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes moved, calculating, scanning. And when the first voice raised, firm, controlled, not yelling but not asking either, the room cracked open, glasses stilled midair, conversations died mid-sentence, and fear spread in quiet waves, subtle but unmistakable. People froze, then flinched, then obeyed, chairs scraping softly as they lowered themselves, hands trembling as they set things down. And I watched it all like I was outside of it, like I'd already lived this moment somewhere else, sometime before, and maybe I had, maybe that was the difference, because while everyone else reacted I didn't, my hands didn't shake, my breathing didn't change, I just stood there, steady, mind clear, noticing details instead of fear, the distance between tables, the exits, the line of sight, the rhythm of his movement, and I adjusted without thinking, one small step to the left to block the view of a child still sitting upright. A subtle tilt of my head signaling the couple near me to stay down. A quiet placement of my tray on the nearest table so it wouldn't fall and shatter the fragile silence. And that's when I felt it, not the threat in the room but something else. Something heavier, a gaze, precise and unwavering. And I didn't need to look to know it was him, the man in the corner booth, the one no one approached without permission, the one who hadn't moved since the moment everything changed, because while everyone else was watching the danger, he was watching me. And when I finally turned my head just enough to meet his eyes, it wasn't fear I saw there, it wasn't even concern, it was recognition, sharp and immediate, like he just found something he hadn't known he was looking for. And for a second, everything narrowed, the noise, the tension, the entire room fading into the background, leaving just that moment, that connection, his dark gaze locking onto mine as if measuring something, as if confirming a suspicion. And I didn't look away, I didn't need to, because whatever he saw in me, I had already accepted in myself a long time ago. The stillness, the control, the absence of panic, it wasn't strength, not really, it was practice, it was survival. And somewhere in that silence between us, I realized something had shifted, not in the room but in him, because he leaned back just slightly, one finger tapping once against the table. A small movement that meant nothing to anyone else, but everything to the men who stood behind him. And I didn't understand it yet, not fully, but I felt it. The change in the air, the quiet inevitability of what would come next. And as the rain continued to fall outside, steady and relentless, I knew this night wasn't ending the way it started, because he hadn't just noticed me. He had chosen to. The shift happened so quietly most people never noticed it, but I did, because I was already watching him the way he was watching me. And when his finger tapped the table just once, it was like a signal traveling through invisible wires, because the men behind him straightened, not abruptly, not dramatically, just enough to change the weight in the room, and suddenly the tension felt contained, like something unseen had stepped in between fear and outcome. And I exhaled without realizing I had been holding my breath, not from panic but from anticipation, because moments like this always had a breaking point, and this one had just passed it. And while the rest of the room stayed frozen, caught in that fragile stillness, I noticed the smallest details begin to shift, the angle of a shoulder, the way footsteps adjusted, the subtle repositioning of presence that turned chaos into something controlled, something directed. And I understood then that whatever was happening was no longer random, it was managed. And I hated that I recognized that feeling so clearly, because it meant I had seen it before, lived it before, survived it before, and that familiarity settled into my bones like something old and unshakable. And when I glanced back at him just for a second, he was still there, still seated, still composed, but his attention had not moved, not from me, not even for a moment, like everything else in the room had become secondary. And I felt that again, that strange pull, not fear, not comfort, something sharper, something that made my chest tighten in a way I could not explain, because he was not looking at me like I was in danger. He was looking at me like I was the answer to a question he had not asked out loud, and that was more unsettling than anything else in the room, because danger was predictable, people like him were not. And as the seconds stretched, the quiet became heavier, thicker, until finally it broke, not with noise but with release, the kind that comes when something has been decided without words. and people began to move again, slowly at first, like they were testing reality, like they were unsure if it was safe to breathe normally. And then the room filled with sound again, low voices, nervous laughter, the clink of glass, all of it layered over the echo of what had almost happened, and I stepped back into motion with them, picking up my tray, adjusting a chair, doing what I had always done, blending into the background, becoming invisible again, because that was how you survived. You did not stand out, you did not draw attention, you did not let anyone see too much. And for a moment I thought it had worked. I thought I could slip back into that quiet space where no one noticed anything beyond what they expected to see. But then I felt it, the absence of distance, the awareness that he was no longer across the room, and I turned slightly, just enough to confirm what I already knew. And there he was, closer now, not rushed, not hurried, just present in a way that made everything else feel less important. And when he stopped a few feet away from me, the air seemed to settle around him, like it recognized his authority even if no one said it out loud. And I kept my expression neutral, my posture steady, because whatever this was, whatever he wanted, I was not going to give him anything he did not earn. And for a second we just stood there, two people in the aftermath of something unspoken, measuring each other in silence, until he finally spoke, his voice low, controlled, carrying just enough weight to make everything else fade again, and he said, "You were not afraid." Not as a question, not even as an accusation, just a statement, simple and precise, and I met his gaze without hesitation, because there was no point in pretending, not with someone like him, and I answered just as quietly, "No." And something in his expression shifted again, not softer, not warmer, but deeper, like he had just confirmed something that mattered more than it should. And he nodded once, almost to himself, before adding, "People who are not afraid are either very dangerous or they have already survived something worse." And I felt that land, not as a threat but as recognition, and before I could decide whether to respond, he stepped back slightly, creating just enough space to leave, but not enough to end the moment completely. And as he turned, his final words stayed with me, quiet but certain. "I intend to find out which one you are." I should have forgotten him the moment he walked away, folded the encounter into the same quiet place where I kept everything else that did not belong in a normal life. But some things do not stay where you put them, and he was one of them, because even after the room returned to its careful version of normal, even after customers resumed their conversations and the manager forced a smile that felt thinner than usual, something had shifted beneath the surface, and I could feel it in the way people moved, in the way the staff whispered in corners, in the way my own hands felt too steady, like they were waiting for something that had not happened yet. And I told myself it was over, that whatever power had passed through that room had left with him. But I knew better, because men like him did not leave things unfinished, they did not walk away from questions, and I had become one without meaning to, and that realization settled into my chest like a quiet warning, the kind that does not shout but does not go away either. And I moved through the rest of my shift on instinct, clearing tables, refilling glasses, responding when spoken to, but my awareness stayed sharp, tuned to something beyond routine, and every time the door opened I glanced up, not expecting him, not wanting to expect him, but unable to stop myself. And when the clock finally pushed past midnight and the last table paid their check, the relief that came was not as strong as it should have been, because leaving did not mean escaping, it just meant stepping into a different kind of unknown. And outside, the rain had slowed to a fine mist, the kind that clung to your skin without you noticing at first, and I pulled my jacket tighter as I stepped onto the sidewalk, the city quieter now, the noise reduced to distant traffic and the occasional echo of footsteps, and I told myself to breathe, to let the night end, to go home and forget. But then I saw the car, parked just across the street, dark, still, out of place in a way that only someone who had learned to notice patterns would recognize. And I did not stop walking, I did not react, I just adjusted, shifted my path slightly, kept my pace steady, because whatever waited there, it did not need to know I had seen it, and I almost convinced myself it was nothing, just another expensive car in a city full of them, until the door opened, not suddenly, not dramatically, just enough to confirm what I already knew, and he stepped out like he had always been there, like the night had been waiting for him to claim it. And I felt that same stillness settle over me, not fear, never fear, but awareness sharpened into something precise, something ready, and he crossed the distance between us without hesitation, his presence filling the space in a way that made everything else feel secondary. And when he stopped in front of me, close enough that I could see the details I had missed before, the faint line of concentration in his expression, the way his eyes did not just look but studied, I realized this was not coincidence, this was intention, and his voice when he spoke was as controlled as it had been inside, but quieter now, meant only for me. You left without saying goodbye. And I almost laughed at that, at the normalcy of the words against the weight of everything else, but I did not. I just met his gaze and answered, I did not realize I owed you one. And for a second, something like approval flickered in his expression, brief but real, before it settled back into that calm certainty, and he tilted his head slightly, considering me in a way that felt deliberate, measured, like he was deciding how much of himself to reveal, and then he said, You do not owe me anything. A pause, just long enough to matter. But you have my attention. And that was more dangerous than any threat, because attention from someone like him was not casual, it was not temporary, it was something that stayed, something that changed things whether you wanted it to or not. And I felt that truth settle in, heavy and undeniable, as the city moved quietly around us, unaware that something had just begun that neither of us would be able to ignore. There was something about the way he said it that did not leave room for dismissal, not arrogance, not force, just certainty. And I had learned a long time ago that certainty like that came from power, the kind that did not need to prove itself because it had already been tested. And I should have walked away then, should have nodded politely and continued down the sidewalk like this was nothing more than an unusual conversation at the end of a long shift. But my feet did not move, not because I was afraid, but because I was thinking, measuring him the same way he was measuring me. And I realized something in that moment that most people would have missed. He was not trying to intimidate me, he was trying to understand me. And that made him far more dangerous than anyone who relied on fear, and the mist in the air clung to his coat, softening the sharp lines of him just enough to make the contrast more unsettling, because everything else about him remained precise, controlled, intentional, and when I finally spoke my voice was steady. Attention is not something I asked for. And he did not smile, not exactly, but something in his expression shifted, like he appreciated the resistance, like it confirmed something he had already suspected. And he took a step closer. Not enough to invade, just enough to narrow the space between us into something deliberate. It rarely is, he replied, and for a second we stood there in that quiet standoff, neither of us yielding, neither of us looking away, and I could feel the weight of his focus not pressing down but circling, like he was trying to find the edges of something that did not have any, and I wondered what he saw, what conclusion he was building from the fragments I had allowed him to notice, because people like him did not observe without purpose, and I had become a purpose, whether I wanted to or not, and that realization settled deeper than anything else had so far, because it meant this was not a moment, it was the beginning of something that would not end easily. And the city moved around us, a car passing, distant voices echoing down the block, the quiet rhythm of a place that never fully slept, but none of it seemed to reach him or me, because whatever this was existed just outside of everything else, contained in the space between two people who understood more than they were saying. And then he did something unexpected. He stepped back, creating distance again, giving me room to leave if I chose to. And that small gesture told me more than anything else had, because it was not control, it was choice, and people like him did not offer that lightly, and I felt something shift in response, not trust, not yet, but recognition, the kind that comes when you realize someone is playing a different game than everyone else. And before I could decide what to do with that, he spoke again, quieter this time, almost thoughtful. You watched everything tonight like you had seen it before. And there it was, the question beneath all of this, finally spoken out loud, and I held his gaze, not denying it, not confirming it, just letting the silence answer for me, because some things do not need words, and his eyes sharpened slightly, catching that, understanding it, and for the first time there was something else there, not curiosity, not exactly, something closer to respect, and he nodded once, slow, deliberate, as if acknowledging a truth that mattered more than either of us was willing to say, and then he reached into his coat, not in a way that triggered alarm, but in a way that felt inevitable, and when his hand came back out, he held a small card between his fingers, simple, clean, nothing about it excessive except the weight it seemed to carry, and he extended it toward me without insistence, without pressure, just an offer. If you ever find yourself in a situation where calm is not enough, he said, his voice steady, use this. And I looked at the card, then back at him, aware of the implication behind it, aware of what accepting it would mean, not obligation, not exactly, but connection, a line drawn between two lives that had no reason to intersect except that they already had. And I hesitated for a second, not because I was unsure, but because I understood the cost of being noticed by someone like him, and then I took it because some things are not about safety, they are about inevitability. And as the card settled into my hand, he gave a final nod as if something had been decided, and turned away without another word, leaving me standing there in the quiet aftermath, holding proof that this was no longer just a night I could forget. It was something that had chosen me as much as I had stepped into it. I did not look at the card until I was alone, not because I was afraid of what it might say, but because I knew it was not just paper, it was a decision, and decisions like that deserved silence, deserved space, and my apartment gave me that in the way only small, quiet places can, the kind where every sound feels louder than it should, where the hum of the refrigerator and the distant traffic outside become part of your thoughts whether you want them to or not. And I stood just inside the door for a moment, keys still in my hand, jacket damp from the mist, replaying everything that had happened like it might rearrange itself into something simpler if I looked at it long enough. But it did not. It stayed exactly as it was, sharp, deliberate, unfinished, and I finally moved, setting my bag down, placing the card on the small kitchen counter like it might shift if I held onto it too long. And for a few seconds I just stared at it, noticing details the same way I had noticed everything else that night. The weight of the paper, heavier than it should be, the clean edges, the minimal design, no unnecessary information, just a name, Sebastian Kane, and a number beneath it, nothing else, no title, no explanation, because it did not need one, not for someone like him. And I let out a slow breath, one I had not realized I had been holding since I stepped out of that restaurant, because seeing it there in my space made everything real in a way it had not been before. And I reached out, picked it up, turned it slightly between my fingers like it might reveal something new if I looked at it from a different angle. But it did not change, it stayed exactly what it was, simple, direct, impossible to ignore. And I told myself I would not use it, that this was just a moment, something that would fade if I let it, something I could step away from if I chose to, because I had done that before, walked away from things that tried to pull me in, learned how to disappear when I needed to. But even as that thought settled in, something else followed it, quieter, more honest. You do not walk away from something that has already seen you. And that was the problem. He had seen me, not the version everyone else saw, not the waitress who moved through the room unnoticed, but the part one kept hidden, the part that did not react the way it was supposed to, the part that stayed still when everything else broke. And once someone like him noticed that, there was no undoing it, no pretending it had not happened. And I set the card down again, more carefully this time, like placing it anywhere too carelessly might shift something I was not ready to face. And I moved through the rest of my night on routine, changing out of my uniform, washing the smell of the restaurant from my hands, tying my hair back, small actions that usually grounded me. But tonight they felt different, like I was going through motions that no longer fit the same way. And when I finally sat on the edge of my bed, the room quiet around me, I found myself thinking about his words, not the ones spoken out loud, but the ones underneath, the recognition, the certainty, the way he had looked at me like I was something worth understanding. And I should have felt uneasy about that, should have wanted to avoid it, but instead there was something else, something sharper, something that felt like being pulled toward the edge of something unknown. Not because I wanted to fall, but because I needed to know what was down there. And that realization sat heavier than anything else, because it meant this was not just about him noticing me, it was about me not looking away. And as the night stretched on, sleep staying just out of reach, I finally reached over, picked up the card one more time, and held it between my fingers, not calling, not yet, just acknowledging what it represented. A line drawn between two lives that had already crossed once and would not stay separate for long. And I whispered to the empty room, more to myself than anything else, this changes nothing. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew they were not true, because something had already changed, not in the world outside, but in me. And that was the part that mattered, because I had spent years learning how to stay invisible, how to move through life without being seen. And now, for the first time in a long time, someone had noticed, and instead of hiding from it, I was holding on to the proof like it might lead me somewhere I was not supposed to go. I did not sleep, not really, just drifted in and out of something that felt like rest but never quite reached it. Because every time my mind slowed down, it circled back to the same thing, the card, his voice, the way he had looked at me like he already knew more than he should. And by the time morning light slipped through the thin gap in my curtains, pale and quiet, I was already awake, staring at the ceiling like it might offer an answer it did not have. And I told myself to let it go, to treat it like every other moment that did not belong in my life. But that thought felt weaker now, like something I used to believe more easily than I did today. And I pushed myself up, moving through the small routine that usually reset everything, coffee brewing, water running, the steady rhythm of a normal morning. But even that felt slightly off, like the edges of my life had shifted just enough that I could not ignore it anymore. And when I reached for my bag, the card was still there, exactly where I had left it, simple, unchanged, waiting. And I hesitated for a second, just a second, before slipping it into my pocket, not because I planned to use it, but because leaving it behind felt like pretending something had not happened, and I was done pretending, at least for now. And the city outside was already moving when I stepped onto the sidewalk, faster than the night before, louder, filled with people who had no idea how easily everything could change, and I blended into it the way I always did, head down, pace steady, becoming just another person on their way to somewhere that mattered. And for a while it worked. The noise, the motion, the routine, it all pulled me back into something familiar, something safe, until I reached the restaurant again. The same doors, the same windows, the same polished surface that hid everything underneath. And for a moment I stood there, looking at it like I had never seen it before, because now I knew what it could hold, what could walk through those doors without warning. And I stepped inside anyway, because life does not pause just because something shifts, it keeps moving, whether you are ready or not. And the staff was already there, quieter than usual, conversations lower, glances sharper, everyone pretending nothing had happened while knowing that it had. And I moved through it without comment, tying my apron, checking my section, falling back into the rhythm of work, because that was what I knew how to do, what I had always done. But even as I moved, I felt it, the awareness lingering, the sense that something was not finished, that something was still unfolding, whether I could see it or not. And it followed me through the morning, through the early rush, through the steady flow of customers who filled the space with normal conversations and ordinary expectations, and I almost convinced myself that was all there was going to be, that last night would stay where it belonged, until the door opened again, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to pull my attention without effort. And I looked up, not expecting him, not wanting to expect him, but there he was anyway, stepping inside, like the space adjusted to him without question, like it recognized something the rest of the room could not name. And everything in me went still again, not frozen, not afraid, just aware, because this was not coincidence, not anymore. And as his gaze found mine across the room, immediate and certain, I understood something I had been trying not to admit since the moment I took that card. This was not something I could step away from, not something I could ignore until it faded, because he had not just noticed me once, he had decided. And when someone like him made a decision, it did not end, it began. And as he moved closer, the distance between us closing with the same quiet inevitability as before, I felt that same pull again, stronger now, sharper, like standing on the edge of something that was already moving beneath my feet. And I did not step back, I did not look away, because part of me already knew what the rest was just beginning to understand. This was not about being found, it was about being seen, and once that happened, there was no going back to who you were before. He did not rush, and that was the first thing I noticed as he crossed the room. Not the way people moved out of his path without realizing it, not the quiet shift in attention that followed him like a shadow, but the fact that he never hurried, like time adjusted itself to match his pace instead of the other way around. And I stayed where I was, tray balanced in my hand, posture steady, because stepping away now would mean something I was not ready to admit. And when he stopped in front of me again, close enough to blur the edges of everything else, it felt less like an interruption and more like a continuation, like the conversation we had started outside had never actually ended. And for a second, neither of us spoke, just observed, measured, the silence stretching between us in a way that felt intentional, controlled. And then he broke it, not with a question, not this time, but with something simpler. You came back. And I almost smiled at that, at the quiet assumption behind it, like there had ever been another option. And I answered just as evenly, so did you. And something in his gaze sharpened, not in challenge but in acknowledgement, like he appreciated the balance of it, the refusal to let him define the moment entirely on his own. And he inclined his head slightly, a gesture that felt more like agreement than concession, before his attention shifted briefly around the room, cataloging, assessing, returning to me with the same focus as before. And I realized then that this was not casual, none of it was. Every movement, every word, it all carried weight, purpose, and I felt that same awareness rise in me again, matching his without effort, because this was a language I understood, even if I had spent years pretending I did not. And he studied me for another second before speaking again, quieter this time, meant only for me, you kept it. And I did not need to ask what he meant, my hand had already brushed against the pocket where the card rested, a small, unconscious confirmation that did not escape him, and I held his gaze as I replied, I do not throw away things I might need. And that earned something different from him, not just recognition, something closer to approval, like I had just confirmed a rule he lived by. And he stepped slightly to the side. Then, not leaving, just shifting the angle between us, allowing the world to continue moving around us without breaking whatever this was. And for a moment I thought he might say something more, something that would push this further into something defined, but instead he did something unexpected again. He waited, giving me space to speak if I chose to, and that choice lingered between us, quiet but undeniable, because he had made his interest clear, his intention even clearer, and now the next move was mine, and I felt the weight of that, not pressure, not demand, just possibility, and for a second I considered walking away, letting this stay exactly where it was, unfinished, undefined, safe in its ambiguity, but the thought did not settle, it did not feel right, because something about this, about him, about the way he saw things others missed, pulled at something I had kept locked away for too long. And before I could stop myself I spoke, my voice low, steady, "Why me?" And the question hung there, simple but loaded, because it was not about last night, not really, it was about everything underneath it, everything he thought he saw, everything he intended to find out, and he did not answer immediately, did not deflect or soften it. He just looked at me, really looked, like he was deciding how much truth to give, and when he finally spoke, his voice carried that same quiet certainty as before. "Because you did not react the way the world expects." A pause, just enough to let it settle. "And people like that do not exist without a reason." And I felt that land deeper than I expected, because it was not just observation, it was understanding, the kind that did not come easily, and for a second I said nothing because there was nothing simple to say in return. And he seemed to accept that, nodding once as if the silence itself was enough, and then without breaking eye contact, he added, softer now, almost deliberate, "I want to know what shaped you." And there it was, the truth of it, not control, not possession, but something just as powerful, interest rooted in recognition. And I realized then that this was not about chance anymore, not about a single moment in a restaurant, it was about something deeper, something that had already started unfolding whether I acknowledged it or not. And as the noise of the room carried on around us, unnoticed, unchanged, I understood that whatever came next would not be something I could step away from easily, because this was no longer just his attention, it was my choice to stand in it. His words did not feel like a question, they felt like a door, and I realized I had been standing in front of it long before he ever noticed me, just pretending it was a wall, and now that it was open even slightly, I could not unsee what was on the other side. And for a moment I considered giving him nothing, letting the silence stretch until it became an answer on its own, because that had always been my way, deflect, redirect, disappear, but something about the way he stood there, not pushing, not demanding, just waiting with that quiet certainty, made that instinct feel incomplete, like it no longer fit the same way it used to. And I exhaled slowly, not from hesitation but from decision, because if he wanted to understand, then he needed to hear something real, not everything, never everything, but enough to shift the balance between us. And I met his gaze fully, letting the moment settle before I spoke. "You do not stay calm in situations like that unless you learn how." And my voice stayed even, controlled, but there was something underneath it now, something I did not usually let surface, not here, not anywhere, and his expression did not change, not outwardly, but I saw it, the way his focus sharpened, the way he absorbed every word without interruption. And I continued, not because he asked but because I chose to, "And you only learn how when there is no other option." And the space between us shifted again, deeper this time, because now this was not just observation, it was context, and I watched as he processed that, not with sympathy, not with judgment, but with something more precise, something closer to alignment, like he was placing a missing piece into something he had already started building. And for a second neither of us spoke, the weight of that truth settling into the silence. And then he nodded once, slow, deliberate, as if confirming something to himself rather than to me. "I thought so," he said quietly, and there was no satisfaction in it, no sense of being right, just acknowledgement, and that made it harder to dismiss because he was not trying to define me, he was trying to understand me, and that was unfamiliar in a way I had not expected, and I felt it, the shift in my own stance, subtle but undeniable, not softer, not vulnerable, but open in a way that carried its own kind of risk, and I crossed my arms slightly, grounding myself in something physical, something steady, because conversations like this had a way of pulling you further than you intended to go, and I was not ready for that, not completely, and he seemed to sense that too, because he did not push further, did not ask for more than what I had already given. Instead, he stepped back just enough to ease the intensity of the moment without breaking it entirely, and his voice, when he spoke again, carried that same calm authority, but there was something else there now, something quieter, almost thoughtful. "Then you understand something most people never will," he said, and I held his gaze, waiting, because I knew there was more, and he did not disappoint. "Calm is not the absence of fear." A slight pause, just long enough to matter. "It is control over it." And the words landed heavier than I expected, not because they were new, but because they were spoken out loud, reflected back at me in a way that made them real in a different way. And I felt that recognition settle in deeper than before, because he was not just seeing what I did, He was understanding why, and that changed things whether I wanted it to or not, and for a moment I forgot where we were, the restaurant, the noise, the movement around us, all of it fading into the background as the space between us became something else entirely, something defined by what had been said and what had not. And then the world pushed back in, a voice calling my name from across the room, a reminder that this was not a conversation that existed in isolation, that life was still moving around us whether we acknowledged it or not, and I glanced away briefly, just long enough to respond, to confirm that I was still here, still part of this place, and when I looked back he had not moved, not physically, but something in his expression had settled, like a decision had been made without needing to be spoken, and I recognized that look, not from him, but from something deeper, something I had seen before in different forms, the moment when observation becomes intention, and as he held my gaze one last time before stepping back, giving the world space to reclaim him, I understood that whatever line had existed between us before was gone now, replaced by something clearer, something stronger, and far more difficult to ignore. The moment he stepped back, the world rushed in again, louder than before, like it had been waiting for permission to exist. And I felt it immediately, the weight of everything returning, the voices, the movement, the routine I had been holding on to like it could keep things simple. But nothing about this felt simple anymore. Not after what had just been said. Not after the way he had looked at me like he understood something I had spent years keeping buried. And I turned away first, not because I needed to escape, but because I needed to breathe, to re-anchor myself in something familiar, something I could control. And I moved through the restaurant on instinct again, clearing a table, refilling a glass, responding when spoken to, but everything felt slightly different now, like I was moving through the same space with a new awareness layered over it, one I could not ignore, and every time I felt his presence across the room, I did not look, not immediately, but I knew I could feel it, the way attention like his did not fade, it stayed, steady and deliberate, and that realization settled into something quiet but undeniable. This was not temporary. This was not curiosity that would pass, it was something that had already rooted itself deeper than that, and I finished my shift the way I always did, methodical, composed, leaving nothing unfinished, because that was how I had learned to live, clean lines, controlled exits, no loose ends. But as I untied my apron and stepped toward the door, I knew this was not going to end at the threshold the way it usually did, and outside the air had cleared, the mist gone, the streets brighter, sharper, like the city had reset itself overnight, but I had not, and when I stepped onto the sidewalk I did not look for him, not this time, because I already understood something I had been resisting since the beginning. He would not always be visible, but that did not mean he was not there, and I reached into my pocket, feeling the edge of the card between my fingers, grounding myself in something real, something tangible, and I paused, just for a second, before pulling it out, holding it in the light as if seeing it again might change what it meant, but it did not. It stayed exactly what it had been from the moment he handed it to me, a choice, a line, an invitation into something that did not come without consequence. And I thought about everything that had led to this, the calm, the control, the years of learning how to survive without being seen, and how easily that had shifted the moment he noticed me, not because he forced it, but because he understood it, and that was the part that mattered, because being seen like that was not something you could ignore, not if you were honest with yourself. And I closed my hand around the card, not tightly, just enough to feel its presence, and for the first time since this started, I allowed myself to acknowledge the truth without pushing it away. This was not something happening to me. This was something I was choosing to step into, whether I admitted it out loud or not, and that realization did not feel like fear. It felt like clarity, sharp and unavoidable, and I exhaled slowly, steady, controlled, the way I always did, and without overthinking it, without giving myself time to retreat back into old patterns, I took out my phone, entered the number exactly as it appeared, and held it there for a second, just long enough to understand what this meant. Not just a call, but a shift, a decision that would not be undone once it was made, and then I pressed it, the line connecting almost instantly, like it had been waiting, like this moment had been inevitable from the start. And when his voice came through, low, steady, exactly as I remembered, there was no surprise in it, no hesitation, just recognition, and I did not introduce myself. I did not need to, because we both knew who this was, what this was, and I said the only thing that felt true in that moment: you wanted to understand. And there was a brief pause on the other end, not uncertainty but acknowledgement, before he answered, calm and certain as ever, I still do. And something in me settled at that, not because I had found an answer, but because I had chosen to ask the question. And as I stood there on the sidewalk, the city moving around me, unaware of the shift that had just taken place, I realized something I had not understood before. He did not change my world that night, he revealed it, and once you see something clearly, you cannot go back to pretending it is not there. And for the first time in a long time I was not trying to.